Ever get that feeling like, there's gotta be more you could be doing?
Yeah.
Like you're capable of way more than you're actually putting out there.
Oh, yeah. I think everyone's felt that at some point.
Today's deep dive kind of tackles that whole question head on. The source we're looking at basically claims that most of us are just nowhere near our full potential.
Mm, That's a pretty bold statement to just come out and say, isn't it?
For sure.
I mean, the author doesn't really sugarcoat it. They pretty much come right out and say a lot of people are basically sleepwalking through life, you know, stuck in routines, getting comfortable, and probably settling for a lot less than they could actually achieve.
Yeah. It's kind of like
Yeah.
they're saying we're all capable of so much more, but we're just not tapping into it.
Right. And the author paints this really vivid picture, too. I mean, they actually talk about millions roaming the streets, dead-eyed as zombies, addicted to comfort, embracing a victim's mentality. Like, whoa.
That's a pretty intense image, right?
It is. It definitely makes you stop and think.
Yeah. And to really drive home the point that this isn't just some abstract idea, the author actually shares their own backstory.
Which is super interesting,
Yeah,
right?
it's really powerful. They came from what they describe as the absolute bottom, like dealing with poverty, a tough childhood, racism, depression, all these really heavy things.
So they're basically saying, look, I've been through some serious stuff and come out the other side. It's like a living example of transformation.
Exactly. And that really sets the stage for their whole argument. It's like, if they could overcome all that, well, what's stopping the rest of us from reaching our potential?
It definitely makes you question your own limits, doesn't it?
For sure. And then they hit us with this core claim that kind of blew my mind. They say that most people, regardless of where they come from or what they've been through, are only operating at around 40% of their true potential.
40%.
40%.
Wow. When you hear it like that, it really does feel like there's so much more we could be doing.
Right. It's like we're all just leaving so much on the table.
Totally. The author even calls it a damn shame.
It's like they're saying we're all capable of achieving so much more, but most of us are just kind of cruising along at a fraction of our capacity.
Yeah, and I think that idea really resonates with a lot of people. You know, that feeling like we could be doing more, being more. So, where do we even start with something like that?
Well, that's kind of what we're here to dig into. We're going to explore the author's perspective on what's holding us back, and more importantly, how we can start to close that gap.
Sounds like a plan.
So let's dive into the whole nature versus nurture thing. What shapes our limits,
Yeah.
our genes or our willpower. The author actually shares this experience they had at MIT where a professor, someone who's clearly an expert in their field, flat out says that there are genetic ceilings.
Oh, like hard limits that we just can't break through.
Exactly. Like no matter how mentally tough you are or how much effort you put in, there's a point where your genes just say, nope, that's as far as you go.
And how did the author respond to that? I mean, being told that by a professor at MIT, that's got to be intimidating.
Yeah, it's interesting because they actually really push back against that idea.
Hmm.
Despite being surrounded by all these brilliant minds at MIT, their own life experience led them to a totally different conclusion.
So, what are they saying? That those genetic limits don't actually exist.
Well, they acknowledge that those ceilings might be real for a lot of people, but they also talk about this 1%. These are the individuals who seem to defy all the odds. The ones who, through sheer force of will and effort, manage to break through those supposedly unbreakable
The
barriers.
outliers.
Exactly. And it's not just based on anecdotal evidence either, although their personal story obviously plays a huge role. Their argument is that there's always going to be a small percentage of people who are just wired differently, the ones who push themselves to extreme lengths to achieve what everyone else says is impossible. And they believe that anyone, given enough heart, willpower, and mental fortitude, can join that 1%.
So they're not saying it's going to be easy, are they?
Definitely not. They're very upfront about the fact that this level of transformation takes a huge amount of inner strength. They even talk about needing an armored mind. It's not about passively wishing for change. It's about actively creating it through hard work and mental discipline.
So it's not really about talent or natural ability. It's about having that drive to keep pushing yourself, even when it gets tough.
Exactly. Which leads us to another interesting point the author brings up. They're actually pretty critical of the whole idea of motivation.
Oh, really? That's kind of surprising. We hear so much about the importance of staying motivated and finding your why.
Right. But the author actually calls motivation crap. They see it as just a temporary fix that doesn't really lead to lasting change.
So why are they so against something that seems so crucial to success?
Well, they argue that motivation is just an emotion. It comes and goes. So relying on it to fuel long-term transformation is basically setting yourself up for failure.
It's like building a house on sand.
Exactly. And instead of chasing that fleeting feeling of motivation, they advocate for something completely different, seeking out discomfort, and even falling in love with suffering.
Falling in love with suffering. That sounds pretty intense. What does that even mean in this context?
Yeah, it definitely sounds a bit extreme, but it's not about masochism or intentionally putting yourself through pain. It's more about changing your whole perspective on challenges and setbacks. Instead of seeing them as negative things to avoid, you start to view them as opportunities for growth. Like each obstacle you overcome makes you stronger and more resilient.
So it's about building that armored mind we talked about earlier through real-world experience.
Exactly. And this ties into the author's concept of the one warrior. They use this analogy from Heraclitus, who was an ancient Greek philosopher, to illustrate the different levels of commitment and capability you find within any group. He talked about how in battle, you have those who aren't really cut out for it, those who are basically just targets. Then you have the people who can actually fight, and then there's that one warrior who stands above them all.
The elite.
Right. And the author's point is that becoming that one warrior isn't about some innate quality you're born with. It's a potential that exists within all of us.
So anyone can become that warrior if they're willing to put in the work.
Precisely. It's about taking responsibility for your own growth and equipping yourself, mentally and physically, for the challenges ahead.
It's about mastering your own mind.
Exactly. So we've established that we all have this potential to become the one warrior, but how do we actually make that happen? How do we transform ourselves into that ideal?
Well, the author lays out three main avenues for personal change: study, habit, and stories. Study is pretty straightforward. It's about actively seeking out knowledge and constantly expanding your understanding of the world. Habit emphasizes the power of consistent action, building those positive routines that shape your behavior and mindset over time. And then stories.
Got it.
Yeah. Stories are interesting because they work on two levels. There are the stories we consume, books, movies, the narratives we're exposed to, which can shape our beliefs and values. And then there are the stories we create through our own experiences.
So the meaning we assign to the things that happen to us.
Exactly. And the author uses their own life as a prime example of this. They frame their whole journey, with all its ups and downs, as a testament to the power of pushing yourself to your absolute limit. It's like they're saying, look, I faced all this adversity, racism, poverty, personal struggles, but instead of letting it break me, I used it as fuel for my transformation.
So it's about taking those difficult experiences and using them to make yourself stronger.
Right. And it all leads to what the author calls the evolutionary algorithm.
Okay, that sounds kind of technical. Is this like some complex formula for self-improvement?
It's not a literal algorithm in a mathematical sense. It's more of a framework, a set of principles and steps that the author believes can lead to real, lasting personal change. It's about breaking through those perceived limitations, achieving things you never thought possible, and ultimately finding a sense of peace within yourself.
So it's like a roadmap for unlocking your full potential.
Exactly. And that's really what this whole deep dive is about, exploring this evolutionary algorithm and seeing how we can apply it to our own lives.
So we started by asking whether we really know ourselves and what we're truly capable of. And based on what we've learned from the author, it seems like the answer for most of us is probably not. But the good news is that we have the power to change that.
Absolutely. The author challenges us to step outside our comfort zones and really confront those self-limiting beliefs that are holding us back.
And they leave us with a pretty powerful call to action. It's time to go to war with yourself.
Which sounds kind of scary, right?
It does. But it also kind of gets you fired up. It's like they're saying that the biggest battles we face are often the ones within ourselves, conquering our own fears and doubts.
And that's a battle worth fighting.
Absolutely. So to all you listeners out there, think about this. What would be the first step in your own personal war? What can you do today to start unlocking that potential that might be hiding inside you? It's definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been real.
My pleasure. Always a good time.
Until next time.